Now it's time, though, for Climate Control, where we unpick the latest stories relating to the debate around climate change. Now, today, Storm Ciaran, a sign of climate change, is it? Or is it just bad weather? Scientists are warning global warming is hot on our heels, and we're closer to missing the 1.5 degrees target than we previously thought. And according to the US scientist who first alerted the world to the greenhouse effect in the 1980s, James Hansen, the key temperature threshold will be breached as soon as this decade. He says that the global heating in the pipeline is mostly down of the continued burning of fossil fuels, so mostly due to the continued burning of fossil fuels. So is Storm Ciaran a sign of climate change or just more bad weather? Well, I'm joined now by Jim Dale, Senior Meteorologist at the British Weather Services. Also, Paul Burgess, he's a climate scientist, first time on, and I'm very pleased to get him on there. Right, let's start with Jim. Jim, I've asked...
Ciaran, not Ciaran.
All right.
Apparently.
All right, well, if that's the best you can do. Right,
no,
carry on.
Go on.
Get on with it. I've asked the question. It was within the question that I asked. Is it a sign of climate change or is it just weather?
Do you know what? At this moment, I can't say, and I don't think Paul can either, in terms of whether Ciaran...
Well, Paul can speak for himself.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm saying it's too early to be able to say that particular storm. It's a one-off event, much as Babette was a one-off event.
But you could tell that
I think there was an element within Babette that meant climate change was in there to a certain degree. Well, it's as I say, these things get sort of chewed over in time. They're not something you make an instantaneous decision on because it's a short-term event. It's not. Short-term events are weather. Let's make that absolutely clear.
Can I just remind you of how you compared Storm Babette to a bath that was overflowing, and it gets to a point and then it tips over, and that's the tipping point. And when I asked you the percentage, you couldn't give me an answer,
no,
but you admitted, you said that it was. Now you're saying that it's going to take time to work out whether it is or it isn't.
Not Babette, I believe that's the case. For this one, Ciaran, it was more about wind than it was about rainfall necessarily. So... Look, these things, they're all very different. Well, storms come in different colours, different shapes, and it's a short-term event. There are many short-term events that we see.
What are you using, then, to determine the difference between Ciaran and Babette?
What I'm using is long-term climate records that basically show the direction of travel in terms of the various components, such as temperature, such as CO2 levels, there's many of them, such as ice melting, such as sea level rise.
Well,
I could go on.
What specifically in Babette was the thing that made you think it was climate?
It was very similar to Hurricane Otis, that it basically got a very intense very quickly as it moved up through the Bay of Biscay into the west of France, picking up a lot of energy down in the Canary Islands with the sea temperatures down there that were at record levels. I need to stress these things because this is how it works. When you get record levels, you get more energy. It's like the pan of milk on the stove that, you turn the heat up slightly, starts to bubble, and it bubbles a bit more, then it overflows. There you go. That's how it works.
Oh, I want to laugh out loud. I have to, haven't I, Paul? What was he talking about?
Well, I actually watched that and watched your programme with Jim and made a video on it, actually. And my argument there was there's no actual scientific evidence whatsoever that individual storms like this are anything to do with climate. So I'll give you an example. If you want to look at, say, the Arctic, people started in 1979, all the records you'll see. So if you've got a cycle and it starts in 1979, which is the highest Arctic ice cover for a couple of hundred years, and we decline it, fine. But what I do on my videos is I then give you the records before 1979. It was much lower, of course, in the 1950s. So if you're going to look at weather and confuse it with climate, you've got to look at the cycles. Yes? And if you start to look at the cycles, you actually get some very interesting things. And in fact, recent work shows if you allow for the La Nina and El Ninos, and you allow for the grouping of them, which warms the earth, no doubt about that, the alarmists say, oh, well, it doesn't matter because the warm counteracts the colds. But that's not true because it happens over decades. So you get a group of warms and a group of colds. If you actually allow for that, and I've got the graphs here, which obviously radio people can't see, if you allow for that, then, and allow since 1959, there is no climate temperature increase at all. In other words, you're going to count from 1959 to today, right, purely by natural events. And there's that work. But what happens is this. I'm called a denier. I'm not. I'm a climate realist. And when you look at the data, it doesn't get supported. For example, people quote record temperatures recently in the UK. The temperature taken at Heathrow was on the runway. On the runway. It's that sort of distortion. And so I can't believe how Jim just backed down from his previous comments about the previous storm there.
There's absolutely no backing down whatsoever. Just to mention one name, Sir David Attenborough, do you think he's a viable person in terms of climate change and what he professes? I just put that out there to you. Probably similar age kind of thing.
Yeah, can I answer that?
Yeah.
OK. What you're doing, by the way, is not acceptable in science. It's called an appeal to authority, but I'll answer it anyway. No, I'll answer it anyway. Let's take David Attenborough. Let's take the walruses that he hasn't apologised for. The walruses that are doing so well that on the beach there were so many of them they had to climb up the cliff to breed, etc., and got chased off the cliff by polar bears. Polar bears who have now grown 4 times in numbers since 1970s because not one single aspect of your alarmism has worked, whether it be polar bears, whether it be islands that have grown, So in actual fact, to answer your question, I like David Attenborough, and up until that walrus thing, I respected him.
All right, there's an even better one.
Let him finish. Sorry, Karen.
Up until that walrus thing, I respected him, but I'm afraid he lost my respect with that because he wouldn't answer it. The evidence on the walrus thing is overwhelming. There's so much food in the sea. The walrus is doing so well that they don't have enough land to breed on.
Yeah, I think we're going out of the map at this moment in time.
Well, not really.
Yes, we are. Let me answer the question.
Hold on. I'll decide whether we're going off the map or not. We're not. So
walruses,
you answer.
yeah, okay.
No, I don't think so, because he's talking about climate change and giving examples, right? Just like you gave examples with a bath overflowing and something else.
Yeah,
he's talking about walruses, actual things. Now, come on.
OK, so look, we've just gone through a period called the Holocene. You'll be aware of that. That's a 10,000-year period where temperatures have been more or less stable through that period, give or take 1 degree in either direction. That's absolutely the case. It's no use denying it, because that is the case. We just broke through that now, and scientists have changed. We're out of the Holocene. We're onto an area now where man is actually governing what's happening in the planet. It's a different name. OK? And, that's an eon, if you like. It's a bit like the Jurassic period. We are now affecting everything that is going on, OK? We've got 9 tipping points, one of which is climate.
All right.
And that is a red warning.
I'm going to give you 20 seconds to respond, because I've got to go to the news, but please, Paul, respond.
That's an assertion. An assertion is not evidence. I will list on my video channel, it's called Climate Realism by Paul Burgess on YouTube, and I will list on that every single reference to disprove what you're saying now. And, I've got the evidence here, which people can't obviously see, but it's just not true. Assertions that man is doing that are not true.
Have a look at the film Breaking Boundaries, OK, on Netflix. Have a look at it. Have a watch of it.
No, I look at the science.
Come back another day.
At the science,
you will
Jim.
see.
I look at the science and the facts.
Proper scientists.
No, scientists.
Well, listen, I'll tell you what. Jim, you go on to Paul's YouTube and he'll watch that film on Netflix. OK?